Alrighty, hello and welcome. So this particular video, we're going to cover the new patch 0.7.7 that released yesterday. I was hoping to get this video out yesterday, but the actual patch time went right up against my normal streaming time, and so I decided to stream and just save this for today. I'm also up against my stream time for today, so this is going to be like a one-shot thing. I'm not going to be editing this video at all, so hopefully it's not terrible. I'm also going to try to get through it fairly quickly. Because it's a very long patch. It's actually longer than the last patch, 0.7.6, which was itself very long. So I'm going to cover the most important things, but there's a lot of things in here that are actually worth covering, so most of it's going to get hit to some extent, and I'll just kind of try to brush over things that are like not super important to go into detail with. All right, let's go ahead and get started here, since we've got a long ways to go. All right, let's start with one of the really cool features. The shrine system has now been added. It's very similar to, say, the Diablo 3 shrine system, with some of a twist to it, especially like some PoE style stuff where shrines can actually drop like shards or idols, which is really cool. They can also drop money, but a lot of times they're just buffs. There's give you attack speed, something like that. And they can also have monsters spawn out of them. From my experience so far, the monsters are usually like random. They just like randomly show up sometimes when you click on a shrine, and not very often, so it doesn't really tell you it's going to happen. But I've only played it for one day, so there's certainly some stuff I probably haven't seen yet. Character introductions have been added. Those are pretty cool little features. So like you start up your character and you get a little introduction of what the character's background is. It's just a nice little extra for the story. Steam Cloud support has been added. This is actually a huge feature because it now allows people to reinstall Windows and not lose their entire save. Before, it was all saved on your hard drive, and it was actually saved in your registry, so it was very hard to pull that out. But now with Steam Cloud support, you shouldn't have an issue losing your save file, so this is a big deal. All right, graphical updates. There's actually been a lot of stuff with graphics that have happened. I'm not going to cover all the details of this because it's so far-ranging. I think there's actually another section here that covers graphics as well. Just know that like some areas are so affected by this that they almost look like a totally different area. The graphics have become quite a bit darker. There's much more of like a Diablo 2 style feel, I think. Maybe a bit of a PoE feel or a Grim Dawn feel. And I think it looks really good. Like, these areas look excellent. They might even be to the point to where we can start thinking about Last Epoch competing at this like next gen level of graphics. That's how good they're starting to look. They're not there yet, certainly, but now we can at least start to say, hey, maybe. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's get into the skills and specs trees, the skills in particular. There's one new skill that's been added. That's called Drain Life. Actually, there's two, excuse me. There's Drain Life has been added. That is an Acolyte skill, and it's a channeled skill, and we were playing with it on stream yesterday. I'll be playing with it some more today. It's been pretty fun so far. We'll see how it goes as we continue to play with it. The Forge Guard has gotten Smelter's Wrath. I haven't been able to play with this too much, but it's a pretty cool little skill. It's another channeling skill, but it's only like a 2-second channel, and then you actually do the attack. It has a really cool look to it. The animation's pretty cool, but haven't been able to do anything with it yet. Plan on doing that soon. Void Knight skill Anomaly has been totally redesigned and has its own skill tree. I haven't even got a chance to look at the skill tree yet because this is one blind spot for me, since I actually lost my own classes a while back, or my own characters a while back, because I did do a reinstall of Windows and unfortunately didn't know that I would lose all my stuff. I don't have any Void Knights right now on my character sheet, so I'm gonna have to make one just so I can see this and actually play around with Anomaly, because it looks pretty cool. The Mage got Lightning Blast, a rework I should say, because Lightning Blast already exists, and it's been pretty cool to play around with. It so far has been pretty solid. I've enjoyed it, but I'm a little curious if it's going to actually play out as well as it looks. Like the actual skill tree looks really good, but people have been playing around with it, and so far pretty good results. Terra's Blessing is a new Primalist skill, or it's actually not a new Primalist skill, it's a existing Primalist skill that got a skill tree. It's a healing skill. It's usually designed to heal your pets, but the skill tree looks pretty cool. I looked around it, I haven't played with it yet, but it does look like it's going to be a really fun skill to use. As far as equipment goes, we got a bunch of new uniques. So we got 10 new unique items, and we also got 5 new sets. In my play yesterday, I only found one of the set items and none of the uniques. Although I do know a little bit about one of the uniques. It is the Legacy of the Quiet Forest, which was actually made by Quiet for Me, another player and streamer of Last Epoch, and it's designed to allow the Spriggan to stay in Spriggan form forever, which it currently could not without that unique. So it's a pretty good add. The rest of the stuff here I know very little about, in most cases know nothing about, because We haven't found him yet, but it's going to be fun to go and look for him. Let me just catch up here with my own notes. So let's see here. So we've got the passives here. I think most of this stuff was not really too big of a thing of a worry. Not a whole lot actually happened in here. There's a couple of new nodes. Most of this stuff is just kind of like balancing stuff that hard to say how it's gonna actually play out. Let's see, Lich got the new top tier passive Corrosive Consciousness, which grants increased spell damage and damage over time. That sounds pretty cool. And Sorcerer got the new node that grants 1 adaptive spell damage and 3% increased cast speed. If you don't know what adaptive spell damage is, don't worry about it. We're going to cover it here real soon. It's been added to the patch notes. It's a new naming convention that they're using for spell damage starting this patch. All right, as far as skill balance goes, I want to make sure I stay with my own notes, which is actually pretty hard to do when you're not doing any edits. So that's right. Okay. Skill balance: increased experience required to reach higher skill levels by a decent amount. Level 20 requires 3% more XP. I think they just want this to go a little bit farther into the end game, so it'll also probably help a little bit with balancing early game. It takes you a little bit longer to get some of your skill nodes. The Damned ailment and the Time Rot ailment have been buffed. Damned can now stack. It couldn't before. Damned is found in the Lich or the Acolyte in some of their skills, including the new skill, by the way. Deals half as much damage as before, but it stacks and reduces enemy health regen by 20%. And then the Time Rot ailment just got a straight base damage buff of 50%. So that one should be pretty interesting. Void Knight got a lot of buffs in this patch, by the way, so it should be interesting to play it. All right, Acolyte skill balance, Aura Decay is now unlocked 10 points. I'm actually not going to cover too many of these things because they're mostly just like moving them around. Like, so it's 10 points instead of 15. But there are a couple of things that we can look at in here. So Marked for Death got buffed. Basically all of its like weaknesses, things that were weakens the enemy, got buffed. So like elemental weakness reduces elemental protection by 100. And it used to be 10. 10 was obviously very low. Metal Rot reduces armor by 100 per point instead of 15. That's the general sentiment of how Marked for Death has been buffed. Let's see. Also, Summon Skeleton got buffed. Where is it? Right here. Got a general buff. But Soul Feast is the one I really want to talk about, because Soul Feast, a lot of you probably know, Lizard IRL had pushed that to over 1,000 waves, which was incredible. His Acolyte using Soul Feast, and part of the reason it was able to do that, not all of the reason, but part of the reason, was because there was a bug node that was allowing Soul Feast to be recast a whole bunch of times, like up to 15 times. That has since been fixed, but Soul Feast itself has gotten a lot of reworking, and on first glance, even to myself on stream, I was pretty convinced that this was actually a big buff for Soul Feast, which would have been very problematic given what Lizard was able to do. Even without that node being bugged, it was still a very strong skill. But I actually talked to Lizard about it, and it turns out it's quite the nerf, in fact. So most of it happens right here. The ward generation penalty on Grim Affliction is now 20% from 25%, stated 15% actual, and is now multiplicative with a ward generation bonus on Soul Bastion rather than additive, which means that the ability to ward generate using the particular kind of build that, say, Lizard was using is not going to work. It's not going to get nearly the amount of ward that it used to. So Lizard himself was pretty convinced that the build as it stood is not going to be very effective, and he's trying to do it a different way, which is pretty interesting. I'm really curious to see what he's able to do with that. I also noticed in my own playthrough that the mana cost is dramatically higher. I'm not sure if that was intentional. I don't see anything particularly in the notes to suggest that that would occur, but it's very, very expensive now to use Soul Feast. So that build is not going to work the same way it used to. All right, let's move on to Mage. So there's only a couple things to talk about in here. One is this Elemental Nova thing. It says no longer has the elemental tag. A lot of people have taken this to mean that it's been nerfed. It has not been nerfed. The elemental tag was a weird tag that pretty much only Elemental Nova had. It means the same thing as whether or not you were able to get fire, lightning, or cold. So for example, if you have fire damage and you have the fire tag on Elemental Nova, and you get increased elemental damage on your gear somewhere, that's still going to work. As long as you have fire, lightning, or cold, elemental still works. So they just removed that tag to make it consistent, but it's confusing people on the patch notes, so I just want to cover that. Focus got quite a bit of changes. I don't know how much they're actually going to matter. A lot of the stuff that got changed was areas that weren't being used too much, so the instant mana nodes haven't been used much in the past, but they could be very strong. It could be worth taking a look at them. The lightning wave nodes got changed. So the lightning wave is supposed to make this like a damaging ability, but outside of one bug node, it was not good at all. that node has been fixed now, and so they've also buffed this to try to make it viable, so we'll have to play around with it and see if it actually helps it. Glacier got a nerf, a pretty substantial nerf too. Glacier was pretty strong, so this isn't all that surprising. And Mana Strike got an interesting, this is actually a buff, even though it doesn't really read necessarily like one. Added a new node behind Teleport Strikes that Mana Strike auto-target enemies close to the cursor, like how Rip Blood does. Previously, if you had taken Mana Strike and made it a ranged ability, it was very hard to target enemies for some reason. It was just really hard to actually get it to target them, so this should fix that problem. All right, let's move into Primalist, where Entangling Roots got basically nerfed. It definitely got nerfed, so a lot of the... If you haven't been paying attention to particularly like Boardman and his use of Entangling Roots can stack on itself. You can keep casting it and get some massive buffs for healing, for mana regeneration, for your pet's poison, for its own Entangling Roots' own damage. Really, really big problem going forward. And this has been this is their current attempt to fix that. So they've increased the mana cost. They've made some of the patches that used to easily overlap not so easily overlap. They're placed farther away from each other. The area penalty is multiplicative now, so you can, so these will definitely not overlap. There's still a way to make it overlap, just don't take some of these, and we'll have to see if that is still enough of a problem to warrant another nerf to it. But the mana cost might also be enough to help. We'll have to see, but this is definitely the first attempt at trying to get Entangling Roots kind of brought back into the space of the other abilities. Tempest Strike got buffed, at least on the spell damage side of it. If you play with the melee side, it didn't get touched at all. And Werebear got tweaked. I don't know a lot about Werebear. I still haven't played one, which is weird, but Apex Predator got buffed while Ursine Heart got nerfed, so it got more damage and less damage reduction. So I'm not sure exactly how that'll affect it, but that's what they're doing now. So Sentinel got quite a bit of changes. Abyssal Echoes now benefits as spell damage, so Abyssal Echoes is buffed. Abyssal Orb was buffed pretty well. Actually, Abyssal Orb may have been buffed or may not have. It depends on how it scales. So it has its base damage increased by 67%, and its added damage effectiveness reduced by 50%. So it should hit hard early, and we'll see if it actually scales going forward. All of the big mana generators, or not mana generators, mana spenders for Sentinel have gotten a 25% buff. So it's Erasing Strike, Forge Strike, Judgment, and no, not Smite. So just those three. This is an attempt to allow for a playstyle where you have a big damage ability that also costs a lot of mana, and then you use a maybe zero cost ability in between while you're regenerating mana. Currently, or previously to this patch, it wasn't really viable because these weren't hitting hard enough. So they're hoping that the 25% is enough. I'm not so sure it's going to be enough, but we'll find out through testing. Holy Aura got some minor buffs, nothing crazy. Judgment also, but just had some things that happened, nothing really to worry about other than that damage buff. That was the really big thing. Ring of Shields got a whole lot of things. The big one that stands out to me is the 3% block chance from 5%. This to me strikes as a very big nerf, even though it doesn't sound like it's that much. Trying to get shield as high as possible, shield block chance, is really necessary for a lot of Sentinel builds that want to go armor and protections, and they need the block chance as well. We'll see how much that affects actual play of these particular builds, but it was an interesting choice by the devs. Sigils of Hope got a base duration increase. This was to combat the massive nerf that they did last patch, which I don't personally think this is going to fix that. What happened last patch is it used to be that if you clicked Sigils of Hope, or you used it, you activated it, it would refresh all of your sigils, and now it only refreshes the one that's closest to expiring. So this is meant to help that, but it still requires a whole lot of clicks to keep it up, and we still can't see the actual timer of the one that's closest to expiring. We see the timer of the one that's least closest to expiring. That's a pretty big problem, so I think more needs to be done for this, but at least they're attempting. And Smite got buffed. Interestingly enough, Smite is one of the best builds in the game right now, is using Smite, and that build is completely untouched by this. And now Smite has a cast speed increase, not just attack speed increase, from Righteous Flurry, which is one of the stronger nodes in the game for attack speed. So now that can be used on more builds than it already could. So Smite's still going to be very popular. Okay, as far as items go, this particular one here, base spell damage, is really important to cover. There's not actually a lot happening here, but it looks like there is. So all sources of base spell damage have been converted to adaptive spell damage. So if you have a staff that used to say 500% base spell damage, it's now going to have some number of adaptive spell damage. The best way to read this is just to delete adaptive from your thought process and just read it as spell damage. Read it like you would read melee damage. So if it says plus 20 melee damage, this is going to say plus 20 spell damage. That's pretty much equivalent. Adaptive doesn't need to be used here. I'm not sure why they're using it, because what the thought process I'm guessing is that they want you to know that spell damage counts for like fire or for cold or lightning, depending on which one you're using. It's still going to count because it's adaptive. But that's true for melee as well. Like melee damage counts for fire or lightning. If it doesn't say physical melee, then it's going to be for everything. So I'm not sure why adaptive is used in this spot. I think it's confusing, but that's all that's happening there. Don't worry about the adaptive part on this, and you'll be just fine. Okay, a couple of idols got changed or added to. So the chance to gain 50 ward when hit idol affixes has been changed to 30, and reduction in the percentage chance. Interesting. I had only started playing around with this idol myself on one build. Found it pretty strong, but not OP. I'm not sure why they chose this one to nerf, but they did. There's some other ones that probably deserved it more, like the Smite. A chance to cast Smite on throwing attack definitely could have been one, but that one hasn't been untouched. Glass Idols also got two new suffix. I believe Glass is, I'm like 95% confident Glass Idols is Mage because of what's in here. So lightning skills have a chance to apply spark charges. Spark charges are like an AoE attack. It's pretty nice extra benefit to your damage. And also there's a suffix for a percentage of your mana spent becomes ward, which is going to be probably pretty popular since ward builds are still very much in vogue. Nothing about this patch outside of the Soul Feast change is going to affect ward. So expect ward to still be used a lot in some of the big high performing builds. Gambling vendors. This one's actually one that's very controversial to me. Or I should say one I don't like. So the uniques and idols can no longer be bought in shops. That one's fine to me. I think that's probably a good way to go. But the gambler got hit hard. Have the chance of finding uniques or set items via gambling. This is pretty interesting because uniques are already pretty hard to find via gambling. I actually just spent 2 million gold trying to find one unique about 5 days ago. And so now it's like 4 million gold, which is an awful lot of gold. Items from the gambler now roll their implicit values when bought, rather than visible beforehand. The possible range is shown before you buy. So it used to be you could see the just the base stats on an item before you decide to gamble on it. Now you can't. That's adding more RNG. I think a lot of people already feel like this game might be a little bit too RNG, so now we have more RNG. I would like to know what you guys think about that, whether or not you think that more RNG is the way to go with the gambler, or whether this is a bad decision. Also, on top of that, increasing the RNG, we're going to get 50% more gold cost for using the gambler. So it's going to cost more, and you're going to have less certainty than you did before about what you're going to get. And this is just another aside. Items in the buyback tab now cost the same amount of gold as they were sold for. I guess at some point they were either cost more or less. I never really actually noticed that myself. Okay, let's go into the other stuff. Armor models now get new colors, which is pretty cool. They actually look different now. This is the first time I think ever in LE that armor has looked somewhat different, so I'm enjoying that. Health potions are not picked up automatically when you're at full health and full potion, so that's actually probably that's a buff. Like if you have full health and you have full potions, picking it up was just wasting it. So now they'll still be on the ground, so if you take damage, you can get them and benefit from them. There are lots more breakables in the game, and they're actually a lot of fun. Because if you use AoE abilities, like stuff just breaking all the time, and the noises are cool, and it's just like it just feels like it's like total mayhem, and I'm really enjoying it. The unique drop rate has been reduced. This might not be that big of a deal because there are more uniques in the game now. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. But as of yesterday, I was finding uniques, but like I said, I only found one of the uniques I wanted, but uniques were still dropping at a relatively regular rate. Like 17% is not a huge drop, so it's not surprising. Also, mana regen can roll on scepters. This actually could be a pretty big thing for certain builds that use a lot of mana, but also need melee. So mana regen being on scepters would allow that to happen. All right, as far as the user interface, the minimap and overlay maps can now be adjusted. You can zoom them in and out. You can use a couple other things with them. It's a pretty good feature. Action bar has been changed completely. It looks totally different. The character sheet now has some arrows pointing different things. I'm not sure this is actually going to help too much. Looking at it myself, I was almost confused by things I already knew, but for new players, it might help. It's just really just kind of tells you, hey, this means this. So like if you have your base numbers, it equals these percentages. So not a big difference, but it might help some players for sure. Let's see, do we need to cover anything with quality of life? Not really. There wasn't actually a whole lot in here that mattered. You can disable profanity filter, so you got that going for you. Skill unlocks have moved to the left side of the screen. I'm just bringing this up because I actually didn't notice it for a while and was playing and had like 3 or 4 points that I could spend that I hadn't. So just be aware that there's some stuff on the left screen now to click to get your points, and there's some stuff on the right. There's on both sides for some reason. Let's see, sound. Yeah, let's cover sound. Well, by covering sound, I'm going to say is there's a lot of new sounds, like a whole bunch, and I think they're great. And best way to handle this is just kind of play the game and listen for them, because they're really cool. There's just a bunch of cool sounds that have been added, so it's a good sign for going forward, as well as what kind of sounds we're going to get. Animation for the Primalist has been completely redone. It looks really good. And this is a good sign also for other classes. As they say here, they're planning to make further adjustments and then revamp the animations for all their classes in the future. So at some point, maybe the Sentinel won't look like he's ridden a horse for the last 3 days. That's going to be great. Let's see, reduce cast time for Reaper, Spriggan, and Werebear form. And then these are some minor animation stuff. The really big one is the Primalist stuff. Visuals, another one I'm going to say, look, just this is a huge thing. This is actually bigger than it seems like on here. Go and play, especially if you really want to check out the visuals, play a new character and play it through the story. Some of the areas have changed so dramatically that it almost looks like a different game. It looks much darker. It looks much more like Diablo 2. It looks much more like Grim Dawn, stuff I said earlier. But like, seriously, go and check it out, because like some of these areas are totally just reworked in ways that are very surprising. Monolith of Faint got a couple of changes, nothing crazy. They had a new mod that enemies can now focus on attacking players. So this is going to be a problem for builds that rely on, say, minions to take damage for them, because they're more likely to go after the player anyway, regardless. We'll see how that plays. They replaced the Reflect Monolith mod with one that gives a chance to mark for death on hit. Probably a good move. The Reflect one was absolutely deadly to all players. It didn't seem to have any place where you would ever take it, so the Mark for Death one seems more interesting. And they also made a tweak to mini-bosses. Basically, they don't give as much experience, but they don't have as much health, but they deal more damage. That's the gist of it. All right, as far as enemies go, so there's a new suffix or a new mod that can be put on them. So, for example, high fire and damage and protection would be for like a fire enemy, or for the cold enemy it'd be high cold damage and cold protection. So that one's a pretty interesting one. There's that focus on attacking players is added to enemies in general. Let's go to bosses, actually, because there's not a whole lot else in there. There's like some health has been changed, things like that, but nothing crazy. So bosses, some of this stuff is pretty interesting. Bosses and mini bosses now take 40% less damage but have 40% less health. What this means is you'll be more likely to CC with a lot of stuff. It says stun on here, but stun's probably not going to be affected. The way that stun works, it's based on a percentage of health lost, and the same attack is going to take off the same percentage of health lost, because they're going to take 40% less damage even though they have 40% less health. So stun's probably not going to change at all. It's kind of surprising they put that in there. It's probably an oversight. But all the other CCs that would rely on health in a different way are likely to be affected by this in a positive sense. You'll be more likely to CC them. Bosses are now more likely to prioritize attacking the player over attacking minions. This is another move to apparently try to weaken minions' power. I'm not exactly sure the goal for that, other than they think that's too strong, so they're trying to do something about that. Elder Panion got a little bit of a change, does more fire damage, less lightning damage. His fire ability was super weak and his lightning was very strong, so that's not surprising. And Prospect's Orion got a buff in general. Idol of Loathing got a buff in general. And so did the Wingari Radiator got an increase in health. All right, so other enemies. Zombies have been added, which has been really fun. Zombies are pretty cool. And so have beetles been added, and they've actually looked really legit. Like, the beetles look awesome. So that's been a lot of fun. Also, if you run across the Imperial Assassins, these guys look crazy. They're really, really cool looking. All right, let's move on to the performance. So the performance in general, from my experience, has been much better. I've only played for 8 hours or so, which sounds like a lot, but there's a lot I didn't do. Like, I didn't run arenas at all. But I've experienced a lot of really good stuff as far as, like, I don't think I've had much. I've had like once where I've actually had serious like lag drops on the game, frame drops. But I also crashed like 6 times, and I've never crashed before. I may have crashed twice in the entirety of the time I played the game. So there's something that's occurred that has caused a crash, or multiple crashes that'll have to be fixed. But I imagine I'll get hot fixed in the next few days, so I wouldn't worry too much about that unless, you know, a week or two from now we're still talking about it. But the overall performance definitely looks much improved. All right, let's go on to bug fixes, which I believe is the last section it is. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of things, because there's a lot of bugs in here that were fixed, as you can see. Like, there's just a ton of bug fixes. I'm not going to cover all of those. You don't want to hear them all anyway. But there are 3 that I thought were noteworthy that players might know about or have affected in the past. So Abyssal Echoes node that unintentionally buffed enemies was fixed. A lot of people were trying to get Abyssal Echoes to do good damage and couldn't because of that problem. That is now fixed. Abyssal Echoes looks like it should be quite viable now. Soul Feast casting too many times is fixed. We talk about that in the Soul Feast section, so that's no longer happening. And also the 1x1 idols that gave ward retention were multiplicative instead of additive, which was causing people to have substantially more ward retention than they were ever supposed to have. That's also been fixed, is now additive. All right, that covers the entirety of the patch notes. Enjoy your time with the new patch. You know I'll be streaming a lot. I'll be streaming right after I upload this video, and probably for a good 6 or so hours. And throughout the week, I'll be checking out the new patch, so would love to have you join me there. Also in my Discord, if you have any questions that you don't want to put on the comment section here, or maybe you do but you want further feedback on it, feel free to join and hang out and discuss. I will see you in Last Epoch. Have a great rest of your day.